Hi, everybody. How you doing? Great. So, as Dr. Wischusen said, I am Becky Carmichael. I am the science coordinator with communication across the curriculum, but I am also a fire ecologist, and you will see a trend throughout my talk that we're going to talk about fire or invasive species because I miss them right now. I should be out in the field. I spent 11 months during my PhD every year out in the field counting little plants. So this is my time of year to be outside. So how did I get to this position? Similar to our last speaker, I thought that I wanted to be a veterinarian. And in fact, I love kitties and I love puppies, and I grew up on a farm. We had like 600 or 700 head of hog. I worked with our veterinarian who would come to the farm, and I would help him do different tasks. So you know what? I applied to one place for my undergraduate, and that was Purdue, because they had the vet school in my state, and I thought I was on my way. Well, it happened that domestic animals, such as cats and puppies, are not as happy to come to the vet to see you as I thought. I know. But there was also another problem. I would go to do the procedure, and after I would draw blood or do something, I would pass out. So, as someone who thought they were going to be a veterinarian, this was not going to work. Fortunately, though, I had different faculty that I was working with in different classes, and one day I was just talking to, her name is Dr. Jody Banks, about my issue. And she says, Becky, I've got a job for you. I need some help creating a virtual herbarium of Indiana flora. And she said, you come into my lab. She goes, I also am going to have you do some general prep, so you're going to clean some glassware, but I also want you to photograph the reproductive cycle of Ceratopterus fern. And I'm like, are you sure? I don't really know anything about plants. But it was in that moment that I fell in love. I fell in love with the photography of it. I fell in love with the dissection of these different plant parts. And then also what I did was I really enjoyed discussing it with others, what we were finding. And it was through Jody that I ended up not only volunteering with the Student Conservation Association and going to different types of conferences with her to learn even more in plant biology and plant ecology. But then I also secured 2 positions with the National Park Service, both in Shenandoah in Virginia, where I was working as an interpretive ranger. So I would take people out into nature and discuss what was going on around them. But I was also working with their botanists to map out the diversity in their big meadow. I went to Joshua Tree in Southern California. You know Joshua Tree. So yeah, Joshua Tree is a completely different ecosystem. But I was in charge of their restoration project of removing large Joshua trees up to 15 feet in height and relocating them to some other place so they could be put back after road construction was finished. And in both of these places, both in Shenandoah and in Southern California, I was working with fuel load mapping. So this was my first kind of experience of getting into fire. In both of these places, I also was working with Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts, as well as the public. So I was still in that kind of area of teaching and outreach. So I knew that I wanted more. I had a lot of questions, and I was always writing down those questions. I had a journal, or I'd type it up on my computer. I finished up my Park Service work. I went back home to Indiana. I took a position with the Department of Natural Resources there, again, doing some more ecological work. And I just had that itch. I wanted to go back to school. And so I had researched different researchers around the country doing disturbance ecology. And I wound up here working with Dr. Bill Platt upstairs. And so it was with Bill that I studied how fire affects Japanese climbing fern, an invasive and longleaf pine savanna. And it was also with this time where I started teaching. So if you've not seen a trend here, really get excited about the ecology. I like to talk about it. And so that's when I was approached by CXC. And they asked me if I would want to have this position kind of as my transition to working with other scientists. Because at the end of the day, I really like, since I like talking about science, I like to hear what you all are going to do with your work. And then I want to know, how can we get what we're doing out beyond this room? Because right there is the key. If it only stays with you, it's not a discovery. It doesn't instill that passion in someone else. And then you're not going to get funding because you've got to have that broader impact. So it's all about the communication. Let's see. So at CXC, this is what we do. We do 4 modes of communication. And I'm going to tell you, in science, we have to be good writers. We have to be able to speak and do the presentations. We have to be able to effectively use visuals to show our work to broad audiences. And we also need to be really up to date on technologies that also help us translate that information. And that's kind of the things we're going to touch on today. Part of your message, no matter which mode of communication you select, you have to think about these 3 components. You first need to determine why you're delivering the information. Is it for outreach? So is it for Boy or Girl Scouts to tell them why they need to kind of keep this trail picked up and why they should understand what's this plant's role in the environment? Or is it to share this with your colleagues or that are within the same specific area of research? You need to also establish your credibility as the person giving this information. So you as the writer, how are you the expert in your field? You may not be the expert of experts in the entire field, but for your research question this summer in particular, you are the expert. You helped design that, we'll go back. You helped design that work. And so you want to have the confidence to be such. And finally, the other component with constructing your message is who your audience is. What are their needs? So think about, what do they need to know to understand what you've done, and how can that information help them go forward with their understanding within your area? And this, I'll say, all 4 modes of communication, no matter if you're doing your poster or you're writing up your research for publication. So as we transition into a poster, has anyone presented a poster before? Great. What was your experience with poster presentation? Ah. Mm-hmm. And so for you in the remote sites, one of the audience participants says she had to produce a poster that both targeted elementary or school-age children as well as faculty. I'm going to put that down. As well as faculty on about playground development. Great. So one of the things you should note about a poster, you are limited in your real estate. So you've got about 3 feet by 4 feet of room to produce and place all of your information. You also will note that in that room, you have a very mobile audience, and they're distracted. They will come up and start talking to you, but then they'll see their friend or they'll see their colleague, and then they'll start having a discussion about that. So you have to think about, on your real estate, how can you, 1, grab their attention and keep it so that your information is conveyed. So with a poster, focused, logical, and organization are going to be your friends. When it comes to organization, I really like thinking about your poster as a publication. And I will tell you, the slides that I have, I will send you a PDF of them because there is a lot of content on these. That way you can use those as a reference. But as with a paper, you have these components that you have to address. And I'm going to touch on each one of these, but I'm also going to note, as for a poster, as with a paper, you don't start with the title. The first place you start is with your methods, and you guys can be doing that now. So as we move with the title, your title should be well thought out attractive, and a larger font. Because this is something that you want to be seen at least 6 feet away from your poster, and you want that to draw people in. And it should consist of 3 pieces. You want to think about what is your topic. So this is, what is the question you're wanting to address? What is the system that you're using to answer your question? And then how are you answering your question? If you can pick out these 3 components within your title, then you have a strong working title. So for example, again, we're getting back to fire and invasives here. How is this title for you? An evaluation of fire severity on Japanese climbing fern, regrowth in a longleaf pine savanna. What do you guys think? Is that focused? Is it exciting? Too long. You can find all 3 components. You can find the topic, the system, and the approach. But if we convert it to a statement, fire severity influences Japanese climbing fern regrowth in a pine savanna. In this title, it's more concise, and now it actually tells you what the research, what's the outcome for the question that I asked. There's still room for improvement with this title, but you can kind of see where we're going. You can make a statement. So for another one, the effects of genetically modified crops on survival of monarch butterflies in North America. We've got our topic. It's about survival. We're wanting to know the approach. We're using genetically modified crops, and our system is monarchs. You can also, instead of making a statement, you can ask a question. Are they impacting this particular organism? And you still have your approaches. Make sense? Okay. Some conferences ask that you put an abstract on your poster. And if so, this is something that you would submit to the conference to get approval to present that poster. There's 2 kind of camps, I feel like, on whether an abstract should be included on your poster, and you want to follow guidelines for the conference. My personal thought is the abstract is your poster already, and this can take up real estate. However, just make sure, follow those guidelines. If you need an abstract, make it brief. It should be less than 250 words. And 250 words is still a lot. And you also need to be sure that you tell the background and significance, your question, the results, and the implication, very briefly. You can do that in 3 or 4 sentences. You've probably reached your limit. So with your introduction, this is where you're establishing interest for the reader. You attract them with the title. They're going to come over and they're going to talk with you. This is where you're going to lay out what you've done. A good model is thinking about this from taking them from the big picture, what's the background, what's relevant, what's already known about this topic, and streaming it down to what specific question and your approach that you're going to use. You can use bullets, and I personally recommend using bullets. Keep it brief. Bulleted statements in a noisy, crowded room with people walking around are much easier to digest in paragraph form. It's also easier for your readers to pick out those significant pieces. So this is an example, and you will get this slide, of how someone took and they found, used bullets to find the background, the unknown problem and purpose, and then stated their hypothesis very quickly. When it comes to your methodology, think about how you can visually describe what you did. You can use graphics that lay out not only the procedure, but the order with which it happened. The penguin is actually from a publication in Polar Biology. You know exactly what the scientists measured to get that information without having a lot of words. So think about what you're doing now, Could I use an image instead? Your results section on your poster should be the meat. That should be the bulk of your poster, because this is where you are showing what you found. For many cases, it should be in the center of the poster. And you want to start with what's the most important finding first, and then start to break it down into those smaller components. You should use images, use graphs to tell the story. And those are things that when you are beside your poster and you're presenting it, you can point to those pieces within the poster to help guide the viewer. You should not include any raw data. The images that you use, the graphics that you use should be very clean. And because this is things that you've already done, it should be written in past tense. It's been completed. You also want to give context to the results that you're presenting. So if you read this sentence, the increased fuel load treatment released on average 46 kilojoules per meter square of heat per unit area. What does that mean? If, however, I say that the heat that was released from my increased fuel load plots was 3 times greater than unaltered or control, now you have an idea of what that result really is. It means that when fuel was added, it was hotter than my control area. So make sure you're putting it into context for your audience. As with the results, when you get to the conclusion, state your main finding first, and then work backwards from what you started with from your introduction. So here, main finding that addresses that specific question you were asking for your topic, and then get it back down to why is this significant and how does this contribute back to what's already known within my area. You can also state what's your next step. It's interesting to say what's my future research, what's my next question, so that it shows you're still thinking this is 1.1 moment in your work and you're going to continue. You can have a mix of past and present tense within the conclusion. You would use present tense if something is current, it's already an accepted theory, that's what's known. Past tense may be something that has changed. So theories or ideas that are no longer considered relevant, that can be in past. So, along with your results, I would argue that your acknowledgements are also one of this, maybe the second most important piece of your poster, though they might take up a smaller area. This is where you are going to thank anyone outside of the authors that you include on your poster who helped you in a significant way. This is also where you indicate any funding that you have received or any organization that assisted you. You do not have to include titles. So you don't have to say, we'd like to thank Dr. Tim Jones. You can just say, we thank Tim Jones. And also, this could be a place where you put small logos for, say, NSF or any other funding organization that assisted you. And so this is an example that has been used. So Tracy, she had thanked people that helped her in the field. She helped for poster design, and then she helped her funding resources. So for your references, a poster should, if you have a couple of references, you need to include those. But you can be very abbreviated with how you do this. So I have up a very long reference where it includes the title. But really, for someone to find that exact reference, what they need is the authors, the year, the volume, the journal name, and the pages. So you can think how much text that saves you. You can also use the science journal method for referencing. and just use numbers. And if you do 1, 2, 3, then within the body of your text, you can just put those numbers within that instead of putting the others. So, I know this was a lot to provide you. And I did this because you guys have got to be thinking about all of these pieces now. Within this first 2 weeks, you've gotten 2 weeks behind your belt, you should already have your questions, or at least some idea of where you're headed with this work. You also probably have some of your methods, correct? That you can kind of be detailing down. I recommend right now, start looking at posters. As you're walking around this campus, as you're walking to and from your lab, look at the posters on the hallway. Ask any graduate students or any other students that are in your lab that you're working in, can I see your poster? Start detailing what you like, what you don't like. A poster is a continual work in progress, so there's always things that are good and bad. But start making those notes. Use your lab journal to its maximum benefit. Start thinking about as you're graphing out the data that you're collecting, what would this look like if I were to create a graph? What analogy might work well when I'm talking to someone? Why is my research important? These pieces are all going to come together when you start approaching that poster. Brainstorm ways that you can lay out your poster now. Start grabbing the current research, and I would rank those journals, those references that need to be a part of your poster. Write little summaries of those journals so that when it comes to the poster, you have just the wording that you need. Note your questions. A poster typically answers one question or addresses one question. If you have two, you may want to rank which one's first, which one's second. Be meticulous with the details. Meticulous. Sketch them out. Take pictures. A picture can tell someone more about how you collected something, but if you don't have the details too with that, the wording, the picture then can fall flat. So you have to have those phrases. Have someone take pictures of you doing the work. You may not end up on your poster, but this is also a nice piece of evidence that in another presentation later for your personal website that you're going to try to put together to showcase yourself and your work, this could be invaluable. So as I said, I'm going to give you the slides. I know this was a lot to digest today. I would also recommend there's these 4 different groups that really do a great job too on elaborating more about poster design. I personally like Colin Purrington's site. Not only does he give some really great tips and tools, he also provides 5 different templates if you're using PowerPoint to design your poster. So you can focus on the content and not on the like, did I get the layout correct? At the studio, I'm located in Studio 151 in Coates Hall. For this summer, I will have some workshops available, as well as I have a studio open if you'd like to come over and work during certain hours. We have software, so we have obviously Office and PowerPoint, but we will have Adobe, InDesign, Illustrator, Photoshop, and we have Poster Genius. So we have some softwares. If you come with content, there's that availability too. Any questions for me? No? Thank you.